AI writing tools. They're everywhere, right? It seems like every day there's a new one promising to write everything. Emails, blog posts, even novels.
It's like we woke up in the future.
Exactly. But in all the excitement, it's easy to forget that these tools are only as good as the people using them. And that's what we're diving into today.
Yeah, we're talking prompt engineering and its impact on journalists.
Because who knows more about taking complex information and making it understandable than journalists?
Right, and that's where this research paper, The Effect of Education in Prompt Engineering, Evidence from Journalists, comes in.
So break it down for us.
Well, the researchers wanted to see if training journalists in prompt engineering would actually improve, one, how they felt about using AI tools, and two, if it actually made their writing better.
So not just teaching them the tool, but how to really get the most out of it.
Exactly. They basically wanted to know if prompt engineering is the key to unlocking the full potential of AI for professional writers. Or is it more complicated than that?
Okay, I'm hooked already. So how did they study this? Did they, like, put out a call for journalists who are already using AI?
They actually recruited 29 professional journalists, all of them specializing in science communication.
Interesting. So these are folks who are used to explaining complex topics in a way that anyone can understand.
Exactly, and they had them use ChatGPT 3.5 to write social media posts about scientific research papers.
Wow, so a real-world scenario. What kind of research papers?
2 articles, both pretty complex and ripe for potential misinterpretation. One was about the impact of psychiatric hospitalization on suicide risk.
Heavy stuff.
Right. The other one explored gun violence and suicide among Black adults.
Definitely topics where you want to be very careful about getting the facts straight.
Absolutely. The researchers chose articles that would really test the AI's ability to be nuanced and accurate. It wasn't just about writing style, it was about communicating these sensitive findings responsibly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hmm.
So they've got these journalists and these potentially controversial research papers. Did they just throw them to the AI wolves and say, good luck?
Not quite. They ran them through a pretty intense 2-hour training specifically on prompt engineering. And for anyone listening who wants to see what they learned, we'll link to the actual training materials in the show notes.
Nice. Love that we're all about transparency here. Now, I'm dying to know, did this crash course in prompt engineering actually work? Did it turn these journalists into AI whisperers? I guess we'll find out after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Okay, so before the break, our journalists were getting schooled in the art of prompt engineering. Now I want to know, did any of it actually stick? Did they feel like they had a better handle on ChatGPT after all that training?
Well, that was the first big question the researchers wanted to answer.
Makes sense.
They looked at what's called user experience, but they broke it down into 2 parts. One, did the journalists feel more like experts after the training, what they called perceived expertise? And 2, did they think ChatGPT was more useful for the task at hand after the training, which they called perceived helpfulness?
Okay, so it's one thing to feel like you know how to use the tool, and another to actually find it helpful for your work.
Exactly.
So what'd they find? Did the training turn these journalists into prompt ninjas?
Well, when it came to perceived expertise, definitely. After that training, the journalists felt way more confident in their ChatGPT skills, which makes sense, right? They just had this intensive training, learning all these new techniques.
Yeah, I'd hope so. But what about the helpfulness part?
That's where it gets interesting. For some journalists, it stayed about the same. But for others, get this, it actually decreased after the training.
Wait, seriously? They felt less helped after learning more. How's that possible?
It does seem kind of backwards, but sometimes the more you learn about something, the more you realize it's not a magic bullet.
Ooh, I feel that. Like when you first discover a cool new app
Mhm.
and you think it's going to solve all your problems, but then,
Exactly. And to figure out why this was happening, the researchers did in-depth interviews with the journalists.
okay, give me the juicy gossip, what they say.
Well, a lot of them admitted that before the training, they might have overestimated what ChatGPT could really do. Like they went in with these super high expectations. But then the training, while it made them more confident, also showed them the limitations of the AI.
So the training was like, here's all the cool stuff you can do. And by the way, here's all the stuff it still can't do.
Pretty much. And this was especially true for the more seasoned journalists in the study. They said that while ChatGPT could spit out text quickly, it didn't have the same style or originality they prided themselves on as writers. One journalist even compared ChatGPT's writing to a secondary school dissertation.
Ouch. I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? You can't really expect a machine to replicate years of experience and personal voice.
Right. And it wasn't just the writing style. ChatGPT also had a tough time with cultural references. Like, even if you gave it specific prompts, sometimes it would use language that just felt off or made references that didn't really land with the intended audience.
It's like those AI-generated recipes that call for ingredients no one's ever heard of.
Exactly. So even with training, it seems like there are still some things AI struggles with. Which leads us to the second big question the researchers wanted to answer. Did this fancy prompt engineering actually make the posts more accurate? Remember, we're talking about some pretty complex and sensitive scientific topics here.
All right, so we've got our journalists. They've been through prompt engineering boot camp. Now it's time for the real test. Did any of it actually make a difference in the writing?
That's the million-dollar question, right? So to figure that out, they took all the social media posts the journalist wrote, the ones from before the training and after, and they gave them to a huge group of online readers, hundreds of them.
Okay, so like a big blind taste test for AI-generated content.
Yeah, exactly. And these readers had no clue the posts were written with AI. They were just asked to rate them. Like, how clear was the writing? Did it seem trustworthy? Were the posts engaging? Things like that.
So they were looking for, like, would this actually grab someone's attention on social media? Make them want to learn more?
Exactly. And the results, well, they were a little unexpected.
Uh-oh, I don't like the sound of that. What happened? Did the training backfire?
It wasn't quite that dramatic. Basically, the readers didn't see a big difference between the posts written before the training and the ones written after.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
All that work? And it didn't really change how the average reader felt about the posts.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there were some small improvements. Like, the posts written after the training were rated slightly clearer and more in-depth, but nothing earth-shattering. Certainly not a night and day difference.
So it's like all that fancy prompt engineering might be more about fine-tuning the process behind the scenes, not so much about creating something noticeably different for the reader.
That's a really interesting way to put it, and it does make you wonder if even with all this training, professional writers are having a hard time making AI content that's drastically better. What does that mean for the future of, well, writing in general?
Right. Like, are we getting to a point where AI writing is basically good enough to blend in, even for professional stuff?
That's the big question, isn't it? And this study just looked at journalists and science writing, but it makes you think, what about other kinds of writing? What about students using these tools or businesses?
It's a whole new world out there, and it's changing so fast.
It really is. And studies like this, they're so important because they force us to really think about how we use these tools and what it means for the future of how we communicate.
Couldn't agree more. This has been a fascinating deep dive. Lots to think about.
Definitely.
And for our listeners, if you want to go even deeper, we've got links to the full research paper and those prompt engineering training materials we mentioned earlier in the show notes. Who knows, maybe it'll inspire you to do some AI writing experiments of your own. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.